This is the SharePoint Framework and JavaScript Special Interest Group bi-weekly meeting for January 5th, 2017. Thank you all for joining, and a Happy New Year to everybody. I hope folks got some time off around the new year, and we'll welcome everybody to our first meeting of this new year. So let's jump right in. And so for those of you that might be new or first time joining the meeting, what is the SharePoint Framework and the JavaScript Special Interest Group all about? So we exist under the larger Patterns and Practices program, and the Patterns and Practices started a few years ago with the idea of spreading out to the community and working with the community to grow and help identify where some guidance is needed and what we can do to help. And that evolved into some code samples and libraries. And then we've extended that now into this idea of special interest groups. The program, the Patterns and Practices, grew so much, and there were so many areas we wanted to cover that it became untenable to do so in like a one monthly meeting. There was just too much to cover. So we broke things out into special interest groups. We started, we're coming up probably on almost a year ago, well, probably in February a year. For the special interest group for client-side development, we were the first. There's now also a PowerShell and Core special interest groups. But the idea is to allow folks that have interest in a certain area to join in and focus on that area and really be able to kind of get more feedback and have more of a community around those certain areas of interest. You could, of course, join as many of the special interest group calls as you like, but they are a little bit more topical, and then the monthly update, of course, then rolls up what's happening in the entire program. So on this call, generally what we're going to be doing, and this varies a little bit from call to call, but in general, we have an open discussion about SharePoint Framework, the development on the SharePoint Framework, using the SharePoint Framework, latest releases. We've got some exciting news coming from Vesa on that today, and just sort of client-side development patterns in general. And we also talk about building the JavaScript core component, the core library, which is there to help folks if they'd like to use it with their client-side development or their Node development if you're developing directly on Node itself. And it can also be used with the SharePoint Framework. So the idea is, like there's the managed code core component, we also have the JavaScript core component. The idea is to make those day-to-day development tasks easier for folks and to help folks out. So we got two links down there at the bottom. The first one is the SPFx-community. That goes to the Microsoft Tech community, which is a great place to post questions and get help from both Microsoft folks and then folks generally out in the community. And then, of course, you've also got dev.office.com/SharePoint, which is your one-stop for all SharePoint development. So SharePoint Framework, if you're looking to get into that, lots of resources on that. But if you're doing add-in development, if you're doing server-side SharePoint development, resources for that as well. So those are still obviously valid and supported development technologies. So that's all on that same link. So you can find the resources you need there. So what are we going to talk about today? To get the latest on the SharePoint Framework updates, we've got some news, a little bit of updates around the JavaScript core component, and then we've got two demos. One demo around documentation, which is nothing more exciting than a demo around documentation. And then what I think will be a really exciting is Vesa is going to walk us through some of the upcoming changes for the SharePoint Framework release candidate, which is not quite out yet, but we're going to be able to show you guys a little bit of a preview of some of the things that are going to be included, which I'm looking forward to and is going to be really exciting. And then also got an open discussion at the end where folks can ask questions, and hopefully we can try and answer them. So SharePoint Framework, I'm going to pass it over to Vesa, who I believe is on the call here for an update, who's taking over the presentation.
Let me take over that.
All right, great.
As long as I can see that as well. Now I can see that. So, SharePoint Framework, just an update on this one. So I slightly changed the format. So the release candidate is coming really soon. We already kind of early December or in December, we were kind of hoping that we would be able to get it out before the holidays. Unfortunately, it was slightly delayed. But now we're getting pretty close on getting the release candidate out. So right now, still in the production. We are in the dev preview status, which means that it's working in the first release tenants and then in the developer tenants, and now we're moving into the release candidate. The release candidate is already relatively close to the GA. There might be some changes, polishing here and there, but we're getting closer and closer to the GA, which is a great thing because that means that sooner or later you can actually truly able to start developing production-ready web parts using SharePoint Framework, and that's an awesome news. So I cannot give you the exact day and time when this will happen, but if you follow up on our Twitter tags and the dev.office.com/blogs, you can actually figure out when the release candidate has been pushed out. But we're pretty close, which is really awesome. Other things related on SharePoint Framework, you might have seen this in the social media communications as well. So right now we have already more than, well, close to 30 different client-side web parts samples available within a GitHub. So if you're using AKMS SPFx samples, you'll land in the dev.office.com search UI, where you can then actually filter down and search individual web parts which are available using the SharePoint Framework. And those are really, really super samples to learn the basics as well. So some of them might be complex, some of them are intentionally super simple, so that you can easily adapt the actual concept and then start learning to building more complex stuff by yourself as well. Whenever the release candidate actually goes out, the release candidate, we will start updating these samples as well. So it will take a few days until all of the samples will be in the release candidate status. We'll ping the individual persons who implemented the sample if they want to actually do the upgrade to release candidate or not. And if they decline on doing that, we're going to do that for behalf of them. I can see some of the guys in this call as well. So I will be pinging you guys in the GitHub for asking if you are interested in upgrading your stuff or not. So let's try to get that one up to date relatively fast, so that all of the samples which are available in a GitHub are actually using the release candidate quite soon. And then one thing what we have already done during this week, we used to have 2 guidance articles in the dev.office.com/SharePoint. So if you go to dev.office.com/SharePoint, SPFx web parts and guidance tag, there's now 6 or 7 individual articles there, and some of them are really new from this week as well. I think we pushed 3 new articles in here, and 1 is pending for me to actually get it merged to the dev.office.com. So new guidance stuff, how to do stuff, how to do certain customization or steps or requirements or whatever needs to be done in the SharePoint Framework side. And we're looking into, for example, right now we're building guidance around the localization. So how to do localization with SharePoint Framework client-side web parts, which no doubt is a really, really important thing for enterprise customers as well. But please do go and have a look on those, and we keep on evolving this site as we move forward. Already right now, if you find an issue, for example, in any of this guidance, any of these articles, you can go to a GitHub. There's a link within that article to go to the GitHub, and you can submit a pull request, so we can get all of the stuff updated. At least submit an issue, and we'll get it fixed in the articles if you run into any random issues with this. Some of these articles are still let's say, older versions of the SharePoint Framework, because we've been having 6 drops before the upcoming release candidate. So there might have been some changes as we move along, but for these ones as well, we're working on getting them upgraded on the release candidate level immediately when the release candidate is available. That's a really high priority for everybody working on the document side. So as a summary, just kind of walking through that one. So right now, the documentation and labs are currently in the drop 6 level. Some of our samples are older. In the samples, we are actually indicating the version which they have been built in the sample README file. So you'll know exactly what's the version of that. When we start upgrading those samples to the release candidate, we'll update that tag to match that it's actually a release candidate as well. Release candidate coming really soon, so early January. It's now already, well, 5th. That's pretty early, yeah, early January. And like mentioned, we're going to update the tutorials, and they are going to be released at the same time as the release candidates. So those 5 relatively simple tutorials, getting started tutorials, so that they are matching what we have released within the NPM side. So you can easily actually start learning to use the release candidate, because there are some changes within the release candidate 0. These are not as significant changes from a fundamental perspective, but there are some API changes and some interface changes from a code perspective. And we will, like mentioned, update the existing samples as we move along. And we will start also publishing updated videos for some of the stuff what we have done in the past for within the PNP video channel. So because some of the stuff is actually from May last year, so we need to do a refresh and explaining where we are and what are the steps, and kind of a refresh that situation. Now that we are heading to the release candidate, we're so close to the GA from a code perspective that this will be much more aligned in the longer run as well. Getting started with SharePoint Framework training, we talked about this one in the previous special interest group call on the 23rd of December. We went through the kind of that agenda and what's coming. This is getting closer and closer. Most likely it's going to be released around end of January. So we do have a vendor working on this one, and then we from BG on engineering side are reviewing that stuff and all of that. Right now we're pending for release candidate 0 for that one as well, so we get all of the existing labs updated on the release candidate level, and then we can push that material to be available. And that's really targeted to be reusable modules for anybody to redeliver, or modules and material for you to learn from. So there will be presentations, videos, labs, and demos as part of those modules, so that they are easily adaptable. Good. More samples under GitHub organization showing different aspects. So the sample site is growing quite nicely, which is a great thing. And some of these are in older version, like mentioned. We will keep on updating them as well. Your contributions on the GitHub side, on the sample gallery, is more than welcome. All of these samples are getting credited in our monthly communications, and then they're getting pushed out from the dev.office.com as well. So you will then gain some visibility on based on your contribution. Right now, some of the samples are super simple, like mentioned as well, but they are super simple for a reason, because we want the people to have simplistic stepping stones so that they know how to get started, and then we keep on, let's say, increasing the complexity level of the samples further on during springtime as well. Good. You don't have the latest version of the presentation uploaded, or maybe my saving actually didn't go through. So what I wanted to quickly do, let me share my screen. Just, I needed to blame somebody, Patrick. Sorry for that. So, because I had a demo slide there.
All OneDrive sync issues are my fault.
Okay, cool. You should get them fixed. Cool. So there's few things on the SharePoint Framework side. So this is actually what you're seeing, and let's wait for a confirmation that people are seeing what I'm sharing. And somebody might want to say, I got it, whenever the sharing is working properly.
I can see it.
I got it. Gary got it. Excellent. Brilliant. Somebody actually said it exactly what I requested, which is awesome. So this is a release candidate version of the SharePoint Framework, you can actually see that from the package JSON. So I'm actually running a internal versions right now. So these are versions which are not yet available externally, but they will be released relatively soon, so you are able to start working on things. One of the key things which are making things slightly cleaner, at least from a development perspective, let me slightly zoom that up, is that, for example, the config JSON does no longer have any entries for the SPFx elements, because they are no longer considered as externals, because they're internal, they're SharePoint stuff, they're coming from SharePoint Online. If you have any external JavaScript libraries, you would still list them here. For example, in my jQuery sample site, let's go in here. If I have a reference on external JavaScript files like jQuery, I can reference them in here, but we don't see any more references to the SharePoint Framework specific libraries, which is a good thing. The other thing, if I go back on the most simplistic web port, and this will be a really fast run through, I'm not going to deep dive on all of the changes, is that we have simplified the basic web part slightly as well. So there's no longer a constructor needed for the web parts. That's all done automatically from a base client side web part from a base class perspective. And then if you need to override the constructor, you can still do that. And you need to do that, for example, if you want to load dynamically external CSS files, like in one of our labs, which is for jQuery, where we actually download or make a reference to the CSS file, which we're then going to use within our web part. What else? There's a few additional properties like data version. So this is relating on the handling of versioning changes within a web part. So if you are, for example, as part of your new version of the web part, you need to switch between versions, or you need to modify the data which the web part has a dependency on, you can actually do that based on this information. But other than that, nothing super major from that perspective. It looks pretty much like it was. Some of the changes are mainly on the classes location side, and some of the library changes names have been changed, and that's going to impact all of the existing samples, and we do apologize on that, but we are still in developer preview or now heading to the release candidate. One thing what's most likely you will run into is that the module loader is nowadays called SP loader. That's really kind of a most impactful change, most likely. And there's an SP component loader, which is then can be used for loading JavaScript files and CSS files from an external location. Like in this case, we have a reference to the CSS file, and then we are using that jQuery UI within our rendering. Relatively simple stuff. From a UI perspective, the client, I'm not going to actually show the workbench because I want to keep this relatively short. We're not going to go through all of the things. But from a UI perspective, obviously there isn't that many changes. The basic layouts and everything else is working accordingly. And you can do still call serve. You can still do other stuff as well. Maybe one small thing to notice from a workbench perspective. Obviously, if you missed it, the workbench is nowadays available in every single SharePoint site, which is a big change. That was already announced back in Drop 5. But now in the release candidate, we actually have this nice warning. So the workbench, SharePoint Online version of the workbench actually realizes that, hey, by the way, you're not actually running your web part locally. So therefore, if you are looking into adding that web part on this page, it won't be available. A small thing, but I think that will be slightly helpful because every now and then you forgot to do gulp serve -- no browser or whatever in your command line, and then it's like, where's my web part? Why isn't it available? So it is recognizing that as well. But other than that, there's really no changes from a workbench perspective side. There's some small adjustments and changes also on the how do we actually call the HTTP requests and how do we do the HTTP requests. But we'll get all of those documented in the README files, so you'll know exactly how to do that. But right now it seems to be, well, it's obviously debatable how complex your existing web parts are. So if you build anything, do you rather want to start from scratch so you have a clean table, or do you actually want to start converting them to use the latest version? Maybe actually one thing what I wanted to quickly mention is that we're moving into the types handling, so using the npm to installing the types rather than using the types typing folder. There's some small adjustments here to be done still, but in general we're using the npm to install the needed types for TypeScript 2.0, and that's all done for the release candidate version. So super fast explanation and nothing really new. I didn't walk through all of the details, but you get some sort of an idea where we are and what are the key changes from a web part implementation perspective. And let's switch back on the slides. Patrick, you can actually take it over. And I can have a look on the IM discussion if there's anything interesting. Let's actually stop sharing before you want to do that. You wanted to take over control of my screen. What?
Master plan. All right, so I think the slides should be back up for folks. Somebody could just confirm for me real quick. Yep, slides are up. Perfect. Thank you. Cool. So quick updates here on the JavaScript core component, and we'll show off a little bit of the documentation that we've been working on. First off, a couple links at the bottom. I still have not updated the GitHub link, so note to self. You've got the NPM package, and then as well the Gitter discussion, which is a great place if you have quick questions or things like that. So we've gone over that before. Again, thank you to everybody that has contributed. We've got some great feedback over the holidays from folks who are trying out the dev branch. So really appreciate the feedback and helping to improve things as we move towards the 2.0 release. And before we talk about what's new, we'll talk about, we often get asked, what are some opportunities to participate in the special interest group? So the two main ones, what we'd really like to get folks involved in is demoing either a SharePoint Framework web part, which may or may not use the JavaScript core library. Certainly would like to see that out there, but if you're not using it, we'd still love to have you demo your web parts, especially as we get into the release candidate stage and get closer to GA. I think it'd be really helpful for everybody to see what other folks in the community are building and how they're building it, the various techniques. I know we're learning a lot from everybody out there, so it's really exciting to see what you all are building, and in some cases it's stuff that we had never even imagined folks would build with the SharePoint framework. So very exciting. And of course, if you have a SharePoint or a project rather that is just using the core library, maybe in Node or maybe you know, in a content editor web part, something like that, also interested in seeing those. I think those are valuable demos for folks to see as well, multiple ways to consume the library. Then, of course, you can also contribute on GitHub, either by submitting code, reporting issues, or just general feedback. Always really appreciate that. And you can also contribute to the Wiki, which is what we'll talk about here in a little bit. And then providing feedback. So just general feedback on this call or through any of the various social channels we've talked about throughout the call. So either the tech community, Gitter, you know, those sorts of things. You could even find us on Twitter if you have feedback and want to get at us that way. So next thing I wanted to mention is we talked last call about the growth of the library, and so I looked at the numbers for December and wanted to share them because I think it's really exciting to see. We've got an extra 1 million requests in the month of December, and we've got we're up to 244 tenants, so not quite 100 more tenants, but close. And I think that's really exciting to continue to see that growth. And I think that's a testament to the great work we've all done in the community and the great work you all are doing out there on your projects and with your customers to incorporate the library. So really exciting. We've only got 197 million requests a month to go to catch, no, 997 requests a month to go to catch the core library. But we will
not too much.
We will get there. We will overtake them. And but anyway, in all seriousness, it's very exciting growth. And I just wanted to share that with all of you because it's something we're all doing as part of this community is seeing this growth. It's not something, you know, we're driving from engineering. It's something you all are driving out there in the field. So very much wanted to say thank you for that, driving that growth as well. So some updates. We're moving very much closer to the 2.0 release. Like I said, we had lots of updates over the holidays. Got some great feedback from folks. Russell was very active, and a couple others, in getting us some feedback. Mauricio as well. I remember got some stuff out there. over the holidays, so it's really great to see that. I think we've got a solid code base. If you'd like to look at the 2.0 code base, that is the dev branch right now, is essentially our sort of release candidate for 2.0. So lots of updates. Many of those updates should be fairly transparent to folks consuming the library. We've tried, but there's a few changes. We'll talk about those here in a second. And then we've rewritten and simplified a lot of the core request pipeline. And that was as a result of some of the feedback we got. And I think that's going to make stuff a little bit easier and give folks who need a little bit more control a little bit more control. And we'll talk about that as well here in a second. The other thing I've spent a lot of time recently working on is improving our docs and examples ahead of this 2.0 release. And so one thing, and we'll look at those here in a second and kind of want to show you guys what I've been doing. And also I want to talk a little bit about docs. One of the things we hear a lot is you need more documentation. And so that's kind of always going to be true. But I want to mention two things about that. The first is if you see a gap in documentation, we absolutely welcome contributions to help with that. That's a great place to help contribute, and it's a great place to really help out the community. So if you see a place where our docs are lacking and you have a little bit of time, I certainly invite you to write a wiki article. That'd be very welcome. And the other thing I wanted to mention around documentation is it's a two-part thing. And the first is we're getting some questions around why don't you have documentation about X or Y or Z, very specific scenario. And that's something we're probably not ever really going to have. In terms of, my customer wants to do X, why don't you have a documentation telling me how to do that? But we'd certainly invite, if you were to create a sample, once you solve that problem for your customer and roll that back out to the community, we would love to get that included and involved to help everybody else. But the other part is just saying or asking for more documentation isn't as helpful as telling us, having a more specific ask around, I wish you had documentation on how to add list items, for example, right? Something, very specific, and that helps us kind of track that, and we can actually build an issue around that and work to resolve that, as opposed to just sort of this overarching more documentation. But we've taken that to heart, and I want to show you some of the stuff we've been working on to help with the documentation story here very shortly. So 2 links at the bottom again, the community and the Gitter, great places again for feedback and giving back to the community. So a quick demo from me on documentation, which is always, I think, if I can get the thing to go, there we go. One of the more exciting topics to discuss. So if somebody could just mention to me, it looks like it's up for me. Are other folks seeing my desktop at this point?
Yeah, Patrick, it's up for me. Yep.
All right, yep, okay, cool. So folks are seeing that, so I want to jump over here. So this is our repo, and the first thing I want to mention is, like I said, in the dev branch, this is essentially the 2.0 release candidate. So if you want to pull dev and play with this and give us feedback, we'd very much appreciate that as we move towards releasing it. We'd like, obviously, the 2.0 release to be as solid as possible. But what I wanted to really talk about is some stuff we've been doing in the wiki to sort of help with this idea of needing more documentation. So until the 2.0 release, we have not updated the menu here on the right, but you can get to the pages using this little pages toggle thing. And so you can see we've added a whole bunch of articles, and I wanted to show you we've got one for moving for 1.0 to 2.0, so talking about some of the changes there. And then, so trying to be, a little bit more explicit about this, but we've also are starting to add, instead of making folks go out to the samples or go look at the blog posts, things like that, we're pulling these things into the wiki to talk about, here's how to use this. So hopefully, again, helping folks who are coming to the library or are new to the library or have been using it and have questions. So we've got an article now on basic operations, so how to read data how to use some of these OData operations such as filter and skip, and how to add and update values, so doing some very basic operations. We've got pages now talking about how to use the batching and how the batching works, as well with caching, so we're building that out. We've got pages on some more advanced topics. This was a piece of the feedback that came in over the holidays, is maybe I need to write my own fetch client, essentially. So we've got an article here on writing your own fetch client. Something, so trying to help folks. Again, we've got more detailed articles on debugging, and so how to do actual debugging both in Visual Studio Code and then in browser. So trying to really help folks walk through some of this stuff. And then let's see, and then we've got the last article I'll sort of show you. I'm not going to go through all of these, but we've got an article here on the response parsers, sort of how they work, and then if you need to create a custom one, how to go about that. So again, we're trying to get that documentation out there. We're trying to be responsive to that feedback. But my ask to all of you is, if you have a need for a piece of documentation, let us know, but be as specific as possible. So, something around, if we had documentation for one of the questions that came in, it was not actually over the holidays, I think it was this week, is there's no documentation on how to configure the library. And there actually was, but it was off on a blog post. You had to go look for it. So we're going to have an article here that talks about how to set up all this configuration. Some of this, for example, the fetch client factory is a 2.0 change. So these are all written in the 2.0 sort of frame of reference. So keep that in mind. So if you kind of look at the docs and they're not matching up to, so for example, like the 106 release, these are going to be tied to the 2.0 release, which is why we haven't updated that index yet. But this talks about, how to do all the configuration, shows you the configuration interface. So we really are trying to be responsive. We really are trying to make it easier and trying to get the more docs out there. But so my two asks would be, if you have a need, be as specific as possible. And if you have some time, I believe everybody can edit the wiki or add pages to the wiki. If that's not true, somebody just let me know, and we'll check the permissions. Since we moved repositories, the permissions might have reset. But so definitely welcome help on writing these articles, and that just helps all of us in the community get these things out there. And then as we do the 2.0 release, we'll update here the index as well to make it really easy to find all those articles I just went through. So, but you can find them now under the pages, under the wiki, on the GitHub site. So do check those out, and of course welcome feedback on those things as well. So we'll jump back to the slides. I know mine wasn't as cool as Vase's, because documentation is always fun. But I think it's very valuable, and I think it's trying to meet a need and respond to some feedback from folks out in the community. So we'll just kind of open things up now, and we'll head. We've got plenty of time for open discussion. So if folks have questions or comments, welcome those here in the call. Was SPFx covered at the start of the call? Yes. Specifically, this question. Let's go look at this question. ISO clarification on SPFx dependent library versioning and rollout policy. Well, this is a very long question. I would not be the one to answer that. That would be Vesa and/or probably Pat and team on that one. So I don't know, Vesa, if you've had a chance to look at that one, or something, have any feedback?
Yeah, I think, AC can unmute himself as well. So these calls were open for audio discussions as well. But for this particular thing, I don't think we have a policy right now available. Obviously, it should be available already at this point, but it doesn't exist. And it's a fair ask. The future roadmap and how do we version stuff should be absolutely super clear. And that's something what we need to clarify whenever we get the release candidate out, which is happening pretty soon as well. And I do know that that's probably not answering to the question in the right format, what you were as hoping that we would be able to get solved. But it's a classic challenge of those versions and dependencies with NPM packages, and how do we make sure that we don't break stuff with the future versions. And AC, more than feel free to go to audio, no worries. These are open for audio discussions.
Okay, cool. Can you hear me
as long as you don't take over, the whole call.
No, absolutely not. Can you hear me now, Bess?
Yeah, all good, all good.
Yeah, so it's a question that I see coming up a bunch, and it's really just not just about the dependency on the versions, but it's to understand when developers are taking a dependency on what Microsoft is putting on the page, then how are we to know when you roll out a new version of React, or if we're using if we are mitigating an issue that's already out there or something like that. And then because it ends up being something that we kind of need to know if, like, when you roll out an update, if we're addressing a workaround and the rollout comes out without us really knowing that it's coming out, then all of a sudden our stuff can break without really knowing it. The whole classic of some tenants get it, some tenants don't. I get that we're still in the dev preview and you guys may not have the policy yet, but is there something that a timeline that we can expect to see something like that? From some of the people I'm working with, they've got a real issue with taking a dependency on React because of that specific thing, and because React updates once a month. So it's just an answer we were looking for. If it's something we have to wait till GA, then that's cool.
I would say that most likely we need to unfortunately wait this for GA. So let's put it this way: this problem exists even for us in the engineering side, because the React is evolving so fast as well. So we need to tackle that first in engineering, and then we need to figure out and also share the policy for you guys and ISVs and customers and partners and everybody else. And we need to get it solved. But just being realistic on the current situation from an engineering perspective, the release candidate is coming out relatively soon, like mentioned in the earlier of the call. But then everybody wants to concentrate on a GA, and that means that priorities are during that time targeting the GA. So I would be highly surprised if we can tackle this question and the challenge before the GA itself. But we need to tackle that by GA. We cannot ship unless we do have a clear policy and we understand how this works, because otherwise you guys cannot rely on the platform and develop on top of it. Absolutely get that.
Awesome. Okay, that's the answer I was hoping to get. Where, I mean, at least it's recognized as something that you have to include that as part of shipping.
Yes, absolutely. Cool. Because otherwise we would lose the credibility of the platform. So it's super clear that it has to be there. It's once again, it's one of those things is that it's a matter of resources and getting things done. And even though we're Microsoft, we don't have infinite resources. And I know that people have heard this story many times before, but that's realities of life. So.
Nope. Nah, that's cool. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Cheers.
And Happy New Year to you.
As well. Anything else? Stephen is asking, are the Git locations for the presentation materials? So for the Git locations, the easiest way to find all of the GitHub locations is following. So we do have this one slide from the docs.com, which is actually listing all of those. And that has a list of GitHub locations that which are including the SharePoint Framework stuff, including also the classic PMP stuff, including also, even though some of these addresses are in quotes old because we moved from an Office Dev organization to the SharePoint organization, GitHub is magical and it has a full redirection functionality. So you'll find the right location from there. And then the YouTube videos are shared by David as well. Any other questions and discussions? Oh, one thing what I wanted to quickly ask. I don't know how many of you actually noticed we pushed the webcast was it last Monday or Monday before that one, around how to do modern web stack development in on-premises as well. So using the React, using the Gulp, using the modern way of doing stuff within the on-premises, using the script editor web part in a SharePoint 2013 or 2016, or even content editor web part in SharePoint 2010 timeframe. The question is that beneficial? So do people want, are they interested on doing modern web stack development in on-premises as well? Because the story obviously is that if you do that in the on-premises, if you're still in on-premises, and you learn how to do modern web stack development in there, then adapting SharePoint Framework, if you move to SharePoint Framework, is much more easier.
It was definitely useful, and it was kind of interesting because in your demo, I had to keep reminding myself that you were not using SharePoint Framework because it looked exactly the same.
It did, yeah. Which we know that was slightly confusing. In the European SharePoint conference, in a keynote, we showed that originally, and unfortunately, we even used the same colors. So then we got Twitter tweets which were saying, SharePoint Framework goes to SharePoint 2010. And it's like, no, that's not what we showed. But fair point, fair point. But good to have that feedback as well, so we know where we tackle our infinite resources for all of the guidance.
The Cortana demo was epic as well in that European SharePoint conference.
Oh yeah. That was pretty cool. Yeah, indeed.
I got a very good reaction, I think.
Yeah, that got really good reaction. Unfortunately, even the European SharePoint conference, they got the keynotes recorded, but the recording of the keynotes only shows us in the stage. They don't actually show what we showed, which is ridiculous. So they're pretty much useless, unfortunately. But I'm just watching into the IM window if I'm missing any questions. So Jonas is asking if the PowerPoint BI web part coming back on the release candidate or GA. So there was a Power BI web part available for the modern pages. And I'm not actually sure where we are at that one, because technically it's not part of the SharePoint framework. It's a feature which is being developed by a completely different feature crew, which are then using the SharePoint framework to make that happen. But just out of curiosity, I can actually have a quick look, maybe from our eDoc. What's the current situation on that one? Is it available or not? I'm not sharing our eDoc because that's pretty new stuff. It's available at least in our eDoc, so it's meant to be available at some point sooner or later. Any other questions? And the SSS was probably for the on-premises discussion. I was walking around in my room. Do my hands free. So Gary is pointing out. Dun, dun, dun. Yeah, it's a fair point. So everybody is. So a lot of people seem to be using the modern web stack, but we're missing the kind of a centralized guidance, except what we have in the SharePoint framework, getting started side. And maybe we should actually have a small sidetrack for the on-premises. So how do you do script editor, web parts development, and all of that before in SharePoint 2013 or SharePoint 2016, before SPFx lands on 2016? Kind of showing that one in practice, or maybe even tutorials on that. That would be highly useful, most likely. And then tying that maybe in, like Gary is saying, to the PMP Core, JS Core discussions as well. And to be fair, just to be clear on that one, the PMJS Core, obviously we are super proud of what we've been able to do with you guys as a community members, but that's not technically anything related on SharePoint Framework. You can use it with SharePoint Framework, you can use it without the SharePoint Framework as well. So it's a library which will help to access SharePoint data quite easily. And I'll absolutely have a look on that one, Gary, on the URL. And David is promoting at an API that checks if a user is in a group user voice, which is fine. It's a common ask. The problem really is that the dependency between checking if the user is in the SharePoint group, and that would have to resolve all of the Azure AD groups which are associated possibly to the SharePoint group, and then AD group can have other AD groups inside of it, and there might be dependencies on all of those AD groups. So the hit of doing that is really the key challenge. But if there's enough votes, more numbers always help on getting things done. More numbers mean more attention in our internal triage calls and discussions, and then that means eventually somebody will have to make a decision. We're either going to do that or we're going to drop that. But and the on-premises, the challenge is exactly the same. And on-premises, is it Azure AD or is it on-premises AD? The challenge is exactly the same. It's AD groups. And resolving if the user is inside of the AD group or not. Any other random discussion points or feedback? What am I missing from a SharePoint framework perspective? That's actually always an interesting discussion. So we've been working on the guidance, and there's certain MVPs. We've been working with MVPs on getting some of the stuff available, and it's moving along nicely, and obviously there might be much more material and all of that, but that's again a matter of resources. Now, what's missing is the key point. Are we missing some clear scenario, clear documentation? Obviously, what AC said already is super clear. We need to make sure that we have a clear strategy and process how to tackle the versioning, so that that's clear. And that's absolutely needed to anybody to build proper production-ready stuff. What else would be missing? Production version? Absolutely, yes. And we are expecting and hoping that immediately when we are heading to the GA, there will be much more interest on the SharePoint framework as well. I need to find the original how to provision your dev environment for PMP work video. Fair point. It depends on what PMP area are we explicitly talking about. That's the challenge, obviously. On the SharePoint framework side, the dev.office.com/SharePoint, we do have that getting started steps over there. But then if it's something else than that, then do we have an exact steps somewhere? I don't even think so. We have too many materials on the two different areas of PMP. And have the Ignite ones which are closest on the related on maybe on videos. So probably the Ignite one is showing kind of a walkthrough. The Atlanta Ignite PMP session, at least, was kind of a walkthrough on this is what we were doing and this is what you can do. There was a lot of demos on that session. That's pretty close, but it doesn't explicitly tell what you need to install to get started. Or might have mentioned that during the presentation. I can't remember. I barely remember what I did yesterday. So remembering something what I did in September? No. Can't remember that. And And obviously, if there isn't any questions, we don't have to hang on the line, so that's absolutely fine. If there's any questions for the PMJS Core. Oh, by the way, maybe one related side discussion. In the PMP team, we've been chit-chatting on the name of the PMJS Core, and we don't think that's super cool. So if you do have a awesome, let's say, ideas of a new name for the PMJS Core, like people seem to be more aligning on the cool names of JavaScript libraries, PMJS Core doesn't sound that good. Please let us know. We should maybe do a competition on the naming. Like Mango.js, no. Apple.js, no, we can't use Apple. Anyway. Not quite a question, but I've been following the PMP Core.js library for a while, but only been just able to use the real project and have been impressed. The use of patching alone is a killer, and that's great feedback, no doubt. Okay, easy, we don't rename. Valhalla.js. Yeah, that's that's a good suggestion. Yeah, renaming is always bad, obviously, because when somebody's getting slightly more attention, then people rename and poof, and then you can't find it anymore. So, to be fair, the name isn't meaningful as long as people are finding the stuff useful. That's really the key. So, if it's valuable, we keep on, people keep on using that. Yeah, Patrick.js. Cool, but if we don't have any other specific questions, even though this is kind of fun, I think we can close off the call. And I know that Patrick is processing the video quite fast, so we should get the video out within 24 hours. So tomorrow morning, Eastern US time, right, Patrick? I'm promising on behalf of you. It really depends on how much other stuff is on your table, but you have nothing to do, right?
Nope, we'll get it out quickly.
I was going to speak up because he doesn't have time right now, so I'm answering.
That's fair. Sounds good. Cool. I don't think we have anything special at this point, but like mentioned, the release candidate super soon coming out. Please follow the dev.office.com/blogs and our Twitter accounts. We will push out communications immediately when the NPM packages have been updated, and then we're already relatively close on the GA, which is a good thing. And we will release the release notes as well in the typical locations, so you'll know how to adapt your existing projects. But this is a relatively big change, so let's see if you can adapt to your existing projects, or will you have to, let's say, rebuild some of the stuff, which is, we know that it's painful, but we'd rather do it right now rather than waiting for GA and then do a full reshuffling at that point. But next SIG for JavaScript Core, SPFx and JavaScript Core is on 19th of January. And let's make sure that we have a few live demos on new stuff at that point as well, so there's more compelling stuff to watch, and hopefully some other good discussions. But thanks everybody for joining, and thank you for your contributions and input. Cheers.